coming up this week on the Lifestyle Show 818. Garry and Richard are back, and we've got lots to talk about. Lots of Windows 11 news. We've got the date for Windows 11 launch, Microsoft's messaging on which devices support and which aren't, and what that means for Windows insiders. We'll be talking about that. Windows being blocked by Windows crashed by a rogue advert. Gary's got the news from Fully Charged Live, and we've got lots more, so let's get straight to Richard and Garry. Garry and Richard, good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
And we're back.
We are.
Yes, at full strength.
Yes, I don't know when we work in series, because it seems a lot of programs and podcasts and things work in seasons or series. No idea what we're on. I know this is episode 818, so I've been going since 2006, so I don't know how many series that is. But anyway, we're here back with a new season, as the Americans would like to say. We've had a couple of weeks off.
Goodness.
A week off, actually.
2006. That means kids born at the time it began are well into their teens now. That's actually very scary.
Yes. Yeah. Well. Yeah. My kids themselves were little kids when.
We're tiny kids.
Exactly.
When we started, yeah. And now the big things that eat me out of house and home.
Just play them back the digitallifestyle.com tune.
Yeah, I've still got that somewhere.
That'll scare them.
Now, so we've had a bit of rest while we were away. Garry wasn't really resting. You were at Fully Charged Live, so we'll definitely talk about that later on in the show. I've been playing Windows 11 and Raspberry Pi stuff last week, but it was an interesting week for Microsoft last week. They a couple of interesting things. So tonight we'll talk about, we've got the release date of Windows 11. We had some new builds last week. Microsoft broke things last week.
They didn't, did they?
We're going to be talking soft flaws and hard flaws again, I think. And we know we've got a Surface event coming soon as well, and what we expect to see there. And we might even have a bit of server news. I even got my Raspberry Pi fully updated to the latest version today as well of Windows 11, which is not supposed to be. Yeah, maybe I shouldn't talk about it. Don't mention the Raspberry Pi running Windows 11. I think I got away with it on a previous show. Right. Well, I don't know where to start. So let's before Richard gets too rant orientated with the things that happened last week. Let's just say, first of all, we now know a release date of Windows 11.
Yes, we do. It's the 5th of October is the date. Well, in theory, the date for general availability, but I presume that'll be where they'll start to roll it out to a select number of PCs via Windows Update. I wouldn't think it'd be a big bang event, because obviously we all know what happened in 2018. It'll be a cautious rollout, I would have thought. I mean, Garry?
I would think cautious, yeah. I don't know anything, but I would have thought cautious.
Yeah.
That's the usual approach.
Exactly. I mean, the last few releases that they've been relatively cautious. So I think if you want it and your machine is compatible, you'll be able to find it by actually mainly checking. But otherwise, it'll be slowly rolled out carefully, and they'll see what results come back, and they'll then put more gates up or not gates up, depending on what happens. So I think it'll be a very cautious, careful rollout. If your machine works.
Yes, we'll come back to that. But what they did say was it is a phased rollout, and I think what they're not going to do is make your machine just, when at some point you do check for updates and it says Windows 11 downloading and that's it. I think even if you've got maybe a Surface laptop 4, that's totally compatible, it won't download automatically. You'll get the little bar that says there's a Windows 11 available, download and install or read more, just like they've done for the recent update. So I don't think anybody will be forced on them until Windows 10 goes out of support. Then I guess it could be. Yeah. Which is 2025, so you've got a bit of time.
Quite a long way away, yeah.
Yeah, and like you said, what they'll do, that little banner message will come on devices that the systems that they've checked, and over time, in fact, on the blog post they mentioned that it's going to go into 2022. So over the next months, more devices will get added to that as well. So I don't think anybody's going to get that as Windows 11 is an automatic update. It's going to always be the seeker experience, as Microsoft call it, when they download and install, if your device supports it. And of course, you can probably queue jump all that by getting the ISO, going to the Windows Media Creation tool and manually installing that. So you'll be able to get it that way as well, if your device is compatible.
That's a big if, isn't it?
Yes, it is. So it was interesting on this. We've had a lot of backwards and forwards, and a lot of initial. They made some initial prediction announcements, didn't they, when it first announced Windows 11, and then they kind of changed the mind a little bit and clarified it, and then I think they've gone back to what they originally said now.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure they've necessarily. I mean, the communication has been frankly terrible. There's no getting around that, how bad it's been. But I mean, I think it's been relatively consistent in that they said that if you're on the Windows Insider channel, you would be allowed to run incompatible versions of Windows up until general availability. That's kind of what they said. However,
yeah,
the general availability type builds are now in the beta channel, and the dev channel has now done its usual thing that it does with every release of Windows and jump forwards. So we're now getting builds on the dev channel that are post general availability. And so what's happened is people on the Insider program who were happily using the dev channel, an awful lot have now suddenly been thrown out of the dev channel because their PCs aren't compatible. And I count myself as one of those people, because I've obviously been running it on the Raspberry Pi and also on an Apple M1 Mac, and neither of those are compatible with Windows 11. And so, yeah, the problem is the way it was communicated. I think there was a certain, I don't want to say arrogance, but a certain level of, it felt a bit patronising the way it came down and said, well, tough, you're out, you're off, bye, that's it, gone, and we told you so. And yet, an awful lot of people, I think, found it quite surprising what happened to them. And certainly, I mean, yes, I can see there you got the Windows update for the Insider, where basically says your PC will not be compatible after GA. Therefore, you're out. You're basically out. It's time to move back to Windows 10, which of course means installing a whole new. Going back to Windows 10 is quite a major thing to do. But of course, no one should be using their production machine as their Windows Insider machine, because it's not stable, it's not safe. So that should be fine. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, the whole thing just feels like it's really badly handled by Microsoft. And to be frank, if you're running it in a VM virtual machine, those safeties don't count anyway. You can still run Windows 11 on old Intel machines if you're running an older Intel Pro processor. If it's running in a VM, because the checks don't apply. So it's very confusing. But I would also say you can't run it on an Apple M1 Mac, which is what I've been doing, because that's not a Qualcomm or a Microsoft SQ1 or 2 processor. So Windows and ARM will not run on an M1 Mac anymore. And that's what I think the reason is. Microsoft haven't really been too clear on what's causing the issue there, but I think what's happened is the hardware compatibility for VMs is a level down from what a physical machine is, but even for VMs, Windows and ARM looks for Qualcomm or SQ1 or 2 processor.
Yeah,
that was a long rambling sentence.
Yeah, and I think the same goes with the Raspberry Pi as well. My Raspberry Pi has this exact message, or had this exact message.
Well, exactly, and you can hack around it. I mean, again, I was excluding the Pi there because the Pi was never really supported hardware anyway, and it wasn't. So it seems harsh to castigate them too much on that. It's very much a niche case, and you can hack around that, as you know. But I do think it's disappointing to see support being yanked for the Apple M1 chip, just because I have to say, if you've used, say, Parallels Desktop running a VM, running Windows 11 on an Apple M1 Mac, it's much faster than using a Surface Pro X. I mean, an order of magnitude faster. And so, I mean, I'm disappointed to see that support being pulled, or the compatibility check being ramped up to actually exclude those machines. It seems not helpful to me, but there we go. Even when older Intel chips, 6th gen chips and below, still seem to work.
Yeah, and they did say that they would reconsider it on some devices, and they have, and they've, I think, added about 2 7th gen chips to the list of supported processors.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's one of those things where you kind of see the defenders coming out to defend Microsoft's choice. I mean, and I can understand that there is an argument around, obviously, the Spectre meltdown mitigation is causing problems for Microsoft OSs, and I can understand why they'd want to have the later chips. I just think it's unfortunate to see that compatibility still being enforced, and because it does rule out a whole range of machines. And of course, the fact that VMs will quite happily run on later chips makes it a bit of a nonsense anyway.
Yeah, and what I was talking about the floors as well, they did initially have this concept of a soft floor and a hard floor, and if you didn't meet the hard floor, it wouldn't work, and you'd have to roll it back. If it didn't meet the soft floor, it would work, but you get a warning message, and then if you met the soft floor, then you're in the green column and you were fine. Now I've noticed on my Surface Go, which is in the orange column, the orangey yellow column there, that it doesn't meet the requirements, the minimum. It meets the minimum requirements, but not the hardware requirements. So it's actually still getting the build. And I thought my old Surface Pro 4 was actually ineligible, and it's currently on release preview. So I never expected it to get Windows 11, but actually it will let me select Windows 11. It will let me pick, change the channel to beta or dev, and I can actually get that build, which I'm guessing that's because it was enrolled prior to the June 24th date as well. So what I haven't tried is a brand new image, but I did play about with Hyper-V and created some new images to see what would work and what wouldn't. And as long as TPM was enabled, and you had 2 processors, it would let me install that file. As you mentioned, the requirements are different when it's running on Hyper-V, but I can understand why people are upset. They've been using Windows 11 since June 24th or whenever it was that we got the first beta, and now they're told, well, thanks for your testing, we're done with you now, you can clear off.
Yeah,
I think, but what they are doing is cumulative updates are still going. So if you were effectively on excuse me, if you were on the dev channel, then that's a different thing. But if you're on the beta channel, even though they're telling you to go back to Windows 10 and you might have this message, you'll still get all the dot updates that are coming down the line. So you'll still have the release version. But I'm guessing what will happen is
although that's up until general availability in October.
Yeah.
And it will stop.
And I suspect you might even carry on getting those until the first major update to Windows 11, but I don't know, no information on that.
Here's my major problem with all this. I mean, it does feel like it's a bit of a kick in the teeth for insiders, but also they need as many people as they can testing this. It's a substantial change. They need a lot of people testing it, and right now it does feel as though, Microsoft no longer has the same QC team, quality team that it had back in the Windows 8 days. That's gone. So it feels as though they're giving their Windows insiders a really bit of a kicking here. They said, "Oh, we're being so generous. We're letting you use Windows 11 for a month, and then we're going to put it away." And they have yanked it. And if you read carefully what they said, you could have seen this was going to come because dev channels moved. But it does feel as though they're not looking after their insiders the way perhaps they should, because really, I guess this is kind of the reality of these hardware limits hitting home. I think we all hope that they would perhaps roll back from them, and they clearly are going full on these hardware requirements. And I don't know about you, but unless I do some naughty hacking, which I know Ian, with the Pi and the Lumia you can do, I've only got one machine that's going to work after October the 5th if I want to use Windows 11. And that just feels like I'm being forced to buy more hardware, maybe unnecessarily.
Yeah, you can see they put a line in the sand, haven't they? And that's what they want to keep to. You kind of thought that they would back down a little bit, and maybe especially if you're on the insider program, But then I suppose what their counter argument would be, well, if you're especially if you're a Windows insider and they want to test something that relies on an 8th gen or higher processor, they can't test that feature because you know they've let all these 7th, 6th, 5th gens in. But
but they've always been about backwards compatibility. So we come back to where we were, a month ago or 2 months ago when we first began to discuss this. Microsoft has always boasted about being backwards compatible, and with this move, and now it's really starting to hit home. They're effectively ruling out machines that are more than 3 years old, and that is not good, because we used to look at Apple, who will obsolete machines, and now Microsoft are doing the same thing. But worse than that, they're doing it to their insiders, who are their fans. And that for me is the worst thing. These are the people who have loyally tested Windows all the way through, and I know it was going to happen. And I know if you read the small print and you read carefully what was said back in June, this shouldn't be a surprise. But I think a lot of people have been quite surprised by it, and I think it's I just think the communication here has been really bad. I think back in June that they should have said, by September you'll be out. I know GA is in autumn, but you know what? By September you're out. And they must have known back in June at what point they were hoping to go to or move the dev channel onto the GA build. They must have known that. And so a month ahead, they're already putting support. And that it leaves a bad taste in the mouth. I think they're entitled to do that. I think it was explained that could happen. I just think it was the abruptness of it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think that was probably. It's always been the messaging, isn't it? That exactly. I think they think they've been probably. If you ask anyone on that team, they probably think they've been really clear, but they probably have. But in their obtuse way of delivering messages, sometimes we get this situation where they're not quite as clear as they think they are. I think.
Exactly. Yes. I mean, I'd say Microsoft. I'm not angry. I'm just really disappointed with how they handled, because you know what? You need your insiders more than ever. With Windows 11, you need those insiders to test stuff. They're so important to Microsoft now. And I can imagine a lot of them sometimes going to go, crikey, what's the point? I mean, what is the point?
And of course, real users don't care, because nobody will really bother to. People aren't really going to be, oh no, I can't get Windows 11. I think they're going to, the general population is just going to get them with new machines.
Yes. Which is what I will do, because I'm looking at buying a new machine in the autumn, so I can run Windows 11.
Yeah, I think Gary, you said you had limited machines that run it anyway, didn't you?
Yeah, I've only actually got one machine running it now. I'm on VM, so that VM will be all right.
Yeah, I mean, VMs are fine. That's the thing, you see, and that is what I think almost makes a nonsense of the whole situation. That VMs are fine. VMs are fine. I mean, you can run. A VM on a much older Intel machine, it's fine. It looks a treat. I've no problem. Everything works, and that's what makes, I think, this physical hardware limitation all the more teeth-gratingly irritating. It's just, VMs work fine, and if you look at, I mean, if you're running it on a VM, the limitation is, I think it's a minimum of a 1 gigahertz processor and 4 gigs of RAM. It doesn't need much stuff, and the CPU range is vast, so the limitation feels all the more artificial to me.
Yeah, and it certainly works. Well, I've got it on a yoga book, and it's the original yoga book, and it works fine. It absolutely, it works perfectly fine. It works pretty well on the Raspberry Pi, and certainly on the Surface Go, which is also not compatible. It works fine on that as well. So yeah, I suppose they've like I said, they've put a line in the sand, and that's it. But you kind of think that they might just have let insiders a little bit off, or give them a little. It's fine if you had a little banner. Or, in fact, it does display. In fact, my Surface Go has a little banner saying, your machine doesn't meet the minimum specs. That's fine. It's just the ones being kicked out, I suppose. But
exactly, yeah. I think it's the abruptness of being kicked out a month before GA, because they made a big hoo-ha about GA. And then they kicked everyone out, and then they released a builder with Windows 11 that was pretty much fundamentally broken. So, the build wasn't broken. What they did on the server was broken.
Yeah, and like I said, the devices that are being kicked out effectively, just not going to get updates. I think they'll get the patches for some time, and I think they may even get as far as into the first half of next year when the next build. I think what it'll mean is they'll get the incremental dot builds. Yeah, I think they'll get the dot builds, but they won't get a full build, if you know what I mean. Just like the dev has gone onto it, jumped up.
I bet you a crisp 5p piece that come 5th of October, Microsoft will yank support for updates, because they've said they're going to do that. I mean, again, if they keep support going, updates going, that'll be bad as well, because you can't then say we're going to yank support and then keep it going. You have to draw a line aside, because otherwise, when can you believe them? I mean, they have said that the updates will stop when GA happens.
I'm with you on that, Richard. I think they're going to stop dead, unless they ever change their mind. But I think that's the.
I think it's too late. I think any change of mind would have had to happen last month or 1 month before. I think we're now less than a month out from GA. Those decisions are locked in stone.
Yeah. And I think now they'll want to move on and say, let's not get bogged down in who blocked who. Let's move on.
Oh yeah. I just think the communication is. I mean, I've always had a problem with the hardware compatibility. I understand why it's happened, but I have a problem with it. And I just think the communication around all of this, the fact we're having this discussion, indicates how bad the comms have been, and that's an ongoing problem with the Windows Insider team. Or the Windows team, the communication has always been bad, and this is bad, and it's the. I just wish some of the members of the team who are very active on social media would sometimes say, sorry, we cocked up. It's like, oh dear, unfortunately it's going to happen now, and sorry about that. But it's the aggression with which they come out and say, well, actually, tough luck, because we said this back in June, read our blog in June, we're doing this. And it's almost shades of what happened back in 2018 when they released a version of Windows that deleted files. There were very few people, but again, there wasn't. The word sorry was never mentioned, and I think it's kind of that same attitude feels to me like it's coming across again. It's like that same, we know best, and here's what we said. We said this back then. Tough luck, it's going to happen. I'm just disappointed by it. Really, I'm disappointed. But anyway, lucky they're not trying to send out any adverts on Windows and breaking it, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So, and that was. We'll talk about the builds shortly, but interesting enough, I wasn't affected by this issue last week. So I had two machines. This machine I'm on now, which is on beta, and my Surface Go on dev, and both installed the updates fine. It was only in the morning that I saw that there was, mainly on Reddit, there was all these threads about saying that the taskbar has gone and everything else. Now, I've had something like this in the past a couple of times with Windows 10, where it's eaten up the user profile or something like that, and you can do Control Delete, get Task Manager, or Control Escape, get Task Manager, do like end Task Explorer, run Explorer, that kind of thing to get back into it. But by the time I saw it in the morning, there was a resolution for it. But interestingly, they haven't said what caused this yet. There's a fix which involved going in, deleting a registry, doing this. Quite a bit of work to do. It was probably about 6 or 7 steps. In fact, it's probably on this very blog post. It is that was on before. So there's a few steps to get around this.
But I think the key thing here is that there were some new builds that went out, which obviously caused some grief because we suddenly began seeing the big scary your machine is now out of the Insider, because it was a build 22449 on the dev channel. And but what's interesting was it was also build 22000.176 on the beta channel, which is kind of what's going to be released. And that I think is the important thing here, that it happened on both of these builds. So on the one that went to the beta channel, it was a relatively minor release, as you'd expect, because we're now less than a month away from, at that time we were just over a month away from going to GA. So there wasn't a lot of things. There were a few minor fixes around Bluetooth and some bits and pieces around the out of
taskbar settings.
And some bits and pieces around the taskbar, but nothing major. Some quite major things in the dev channel though. In 22449, we had the SMB compression behavior. So how file compression works changed. We had stuff around again Bluetooth, loads of taskbar fixes, loads of input fixes. So a lot of fixes in dev channel, you see these fixes being rolled out quickly, even though they're not going to go to the October October 5th release. However, both releases got hit by the same problem, which, according to Microsoft, was start and taskbar were unresponsive and settings wouldn't load, which is what they said. You look at social media, it was quite severe. People couldn't see the taskbar or the start menu; they're just gone. They weren't there at all. I mean, I'd happen on one machine, not on another machine. So I kind of had some of the experience. And what there was in a fix, and again, I think you got there on the blog post. Microsoft very quickly rushed out a fix for it, which was effectively to open Task Manager, run regedit, and do some hacking of the registry to make the problem go away, and then reboot, which tells you a story in itself. And they said it was an issue with a server-side deployment that went out to insiders, which rumor has it was to do with perhaps putting ads in the system or some recommendations of new stuff. But there's been no confirmation from Microsoft about what actually happened. However, it was a server-side thing, which is why it hit both the beta channel and the dev channel. And it's a bit worrying because we're a month away from GA. This shouldn't be happening. What are your processes? So this is happening on the beta channel. I mean, it was good they responded so fast. I'll give them credit for that. It's bad it happened at all, and it's worse it happened this close to GA in both channels.
Yeah, and the kind of the rumours are that they were testing some delivery of some adverts, like a pop-up advert type thing for something to do with Microsoft Teams, and some bad data that was causing the problem. And
that's not being confirmed by Microsoft.
No, this is just people doing hacking through the files that came down and that kind of thing. I think they do need to come clean on what it was and to explain why it wouldn't happen again. But like you said, it's not a good look to have a month before general availability that it looks like it was a Windows 11 update problem, and it wasn't. It was another thing. But it really, an advert or something shouldn't be able to crash the whole OS.
Well, exactly. It's kind of an indication of the fact your taskbar and your start menu are not your own. If your T is connected to your internet, and we've known this for a long time because it's like things have been appearing in the start menu for many years now, so it's not like a new thing. But yes, they are not your own.
Yeah, so it was a bit of a faux pas and something that I think they should explain what happened, and people could understand it perhaps then. And not most people don't care, but insiders will want to know why. And it had this hit release, and it was had Windows 11 been out for say 6 months, and then this happened, and it affected every Windows 11 machine that restarted on that evening. That's a major problem, isn't it? Because it's okay for insiders. You're not supposed to use it on your main machines. You could probably get to your other machine and find out how to do this. But if this is your one and only PC, you're not going to know that Microsoft knows there's an issue. You just that's it. You broke your machine. So yeah, they've got to explain why that is not going to happen again.
Yeah, and they won't, because they have legendarily terrible communication skills. Sorry, Windows team. We'll see. I mean, the Windows team is. I wouldn't call it. Perhaps dysfunctional is a strong word. I'm not quite sure. I mean, I write a lot about other systems where things go wrong. Other cloud vendors, other hardware and software vendors, and I've yet to come across just how bad the Windows team is when stuff goes wrong. And this was a really big mistake to make, because the last thing you want to do is undermine confidence this close to GA, and they have said nothing, and unless I've missed it, but I've just seen nothing about what happened here. And more importantly, I mean, both of you work in IT systems. You know that when a thing goes wrong, what you do is you define what happened and you explain to your customers why that will never happen again and what you've done to stop that happening again. And we've had none of that at all, and that's really bad.
Yeah, I think they do need to address that. And I suppose the other thing is that I guess that they should be looking at now as well is, when does Windows 11 go to release preview? Because we're weeks away now. Surely it's got to go to release. Can't go straight from beta to. They're not going to do beta to live, are they, again?
Well, it's happened before.
Yeah,
2018. Yeah. Jason's favourite tweet.
Where is Jason? Where is Jason? Jason, come back to us.
Jason for this.
He got taken to a Black Ops site after his tweet.
Oh dear. Yes, that was bad.
Yeah, I'm guessing that it's got to be the next couple of weeks it hits release preview, because it won't go out to, like I said earlier, if you've got a Windows 10 machine on release preview because you like getting the monthly fixes earlier, you won't get forced onto Windows 11 even if you're on release preview. You still have to click the download and install thing. So I think they can put that out pretty soon, really, because if they've got the confidence that the system's ready to go, then they need to do that.
Yeah.
And like I said, in terms of those builds, there was only a few bits and pieces which you've covered. I've been using it now for this on the beta channel, this Surface laptop, for quite well since it first hit beta, and it's absolutely fine. So I didn't get hit by that issue last week, just good timing. But it's working. It's working fine. So it's ready to go, as I can see. But make sure that it's all these little issues out that could hit in the background. That's the things that they need to test. Yep. And I'm guessing testing the migration as well. That's something that they didn't really do a lot of testing with in 2018, which bit them then. So that's something they definitely need to test. The migration from Windows 10 to 11.
There was quite a bit of testing, and insiders did report the problems with the 2018 build, and Microsoft chose to ignore it. That's one of the worst things.
And
it wasn't a huge. Yeah. So,
but I mean, as far as what happened with the guy, do you think it was related to the new Microsoft Start app that's been rolling out? Do you think that was connected to this problem we had on we had last week?
Yeah, that's a funny thing. That's it could be that they're trying to advertise that. We've seen that. I was surprised to see that this Start app, which kind of thought, well, why do you need an app? We've got news and interest on Windows 10. We've got widgets in Windows 11. But it's kind of a bringing together of a few different sort of news services, and effectively what's in the widgets now, but just on the web.
Yeah, I mean, is it going to replace the news and interest in Windows?
Well, it's the same content, exactly the same content, but just, and in fact, it's the new tab default already, isn't it? It is on my machine anyway.
So just to clarify what we're talking about here, it's the new Microsoft Start, which I think it's going to be a mobile app, isn't it, on Android and iOS? And it is kind of there we go. So it's which is a thing I think they've tried a few times in various guises over the years. I think the on MSFT.com people actually did a history of Microsoft Start. And I think this is the latest attempt to kind of create a Start experience where all these services which you might use are going to be gathered in one place, along with your news and interests. Yeah. So it's interesting. I was going to say, have you been amused by the number of people who are trying to recreate the Windows 10 Start menu in Windows 11 now?
I can imagine, yeah.
I remember the pain of people wanting the Windows 7 Start menu in Windows 10. So
yeah, and people wanting the XP 7 look in Vista, and people wanted the 2000 look in the XP era, and so on, back to Windows 3.1 probably.
So yeah, but this Microsoft Start is now kind of it's very similar. I think it feels like news and interests in that it's kind of curated content of news and stuff you want to look at a feed to kind of streamline the whole process of looking at what you want to look at, be it weather, or be it news, or be it articles that it thinks you might want to read. So again, feels like it might be a way of getting adverts or sponsored content in the eyes of users, perhaps. Or I'm being cynical.
Yeah. No, it could well be. It's
the way it's all going.
It's what was the Netscape one? What did they have it in Netscape
Wow,
Navigator 4, wasn't it?
It back a long way.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, and just a quick sidetrack, and I need to. I've forgotten the series name now, which is great, just as we mentioned it. But I was browsing around on Disney, and there is, I think, Silicon Boom, it's called, a series on Disney Plus. I don't know how old it is, but it looked fairly new. But it's one of those drama reenactments stroke interview of shows, a series, and it's the birth of the internet, sort of the Silicon Valley part of it. Anyway, you know, talking about Netscape Navigator and Microsoft with Internet Explorer and going back to that time. So it's kind of some reenactment with actors, you know, acting out as it was then, plus interviews now as well. So they're quite interesting. So if anybody wants to look back at what it was, you know, the Netscape, the browser wars of Netscape Navigator versus Internet Explorer, then check out that. I only watched the first one, but it looked quite good actually, with all the all the Netscape Navigator stuff. So that's what made me think of that anyway. When they had that, it was a portal, wasn't it? Really, that's what Netscape Navigator wanted to be for a while, and this is the same thing, isn't it? It was all portals then. Now it's Start.
Yeah, which is really a portal. Actually, talking about Netscape Navigator and Internet Explorer, we missed the great switch off of Internet Explorer, didn't we?
Well, it's not been switched off. It's switched off for Microsoft Office, isn't it? It's
basically Microsoft technologies are no longer supported on it. So it's not just Office apparently as well, because I know people who are unable to access things like Azure DevOps on it anymore because it doesn't do screen refreshes and things like that. So they are no longer supporting Internet Explorer on any of their platforms going forward. So
although Internet Explorer will still lurk in Windows 10. I don't know, is it in Windows 11? I know it's in Windows 10, and that will be there presumably for another 5 years or so.
Yeah, I guess so. But it's end of life next year, isn't it? I think for Internet Explorer officially.
I'll tell you now. No, it's not.
Well, there we go.
No Internet Explorer in Windows 11.
Yeah.
I think you can get IE mode, can't you? Something like that, but
because
it's not there now.
It's going to be in the long-term servicing channel version of Windows 10 because it'll be supported by Microsoft. But yes, as you say, it's very much been. They would like people to move off it now, and also Edge Legacy as well. It's all Chromium.
Yeah,
all Chromium.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I found an interesting bug with the Chromium dev last week that it kept launching tabs every, say, 30 seconds without you, or not tabs actually, in new instances. So you were looking at your machine and I'd go away and come back and there's like 50 edges.
Was that in Canary Dev? Canary Edge?
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a bug, and they've fixed it now.
Yeah, so I actually uninstalled it while they fixed it because I was getting on my nerves. So I'm going to reinstall it now. But fair enough. I don't mind. I'm using Canary, so I don't mind on that.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to use a whole range. Sort of obviously Edge. I use Chrome. The one I'm using, the browser I'm finding most usable at the moment is probably Vivaldi, although it's got so many GUI settings that you get lost quite quickly. But I tend to rotate between Edge, Chromium, Vivaldi, and Brave and Mozilla, the ones I use mainly.
just a sucker for punishment.
Well, I mean, all of those bar one are Chromium browsers. So, but in theory, Brave shouldn't be sending bad things. But I'm not going to. And Vivaldi, I mean, Vivaldi instantly have dropped off the browser rankings now because they're trying to get around the issue to websites saying we only work on Chrome by effectively putting a user agent string that says we're Chrome, and so they now appear as Chrome in all the rankings.
Yeah, fair enough. Because I've seen YouTube and other Google sites be a bit nasty with how they do their detection.
They can be, certainly. I would think the Edge team must be quite annoyed with how some Google sites say you should install Chrome. Well, this is all Chromium. Surely it's all the same. It's the same race. It's the same engine.
Yeah. Now, before we move off Windows 11, I know we're out of time, but we need to mention one thing that they briefly mentioned in the October 5th release date announcement is Android apps won't be available when Windows 11 launches.
Yes, they are slipping, aren't they? Which is a shame. I'd like to have tried those on my Apple M1 ARM-based machine.
Yeah. Now, so what they did say is that it's going to be for Windows Insider to test in the coming months, which I don't know how long is the coming months. I'm guessing that's 6 months, something like between now and 6 months. I don't know. I thought we might get it with when we got onto the pre-release builds. But we didn't get it last week. But maybe it's coming soon. But I think somebody spotted a placeholder in the Microsoft store for it.
Yeah.
But it's just it's the Windows subsystem for Android instead of Windows subsystem for Linux. So it's the same technology, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, but I know some people disappointed that. I guess most people aren't that bothered. But it would be nice to see that. But I wonder whether they're holding that back now for the first feature update to Windows 11. But that will be sometime next year. So they'll ship that as a separate update at some point, or they'll hold it right back till next year. I don't know. Maybe
there is some big Windows 11 news, and that is Dave Plummer, one of the old hands at Microsoft, who's now moved on, has confirmed that Space Cadet Pinball does work on Windows 11.
Whoa.
Yay!
Sorry, what?
Space Cadet.
Say that
3D Pinball. Come on,
Yes, good.
It came to I think shit with plus 995, NT4 2000 and stuff. So it still works under Windows 11. So there's backwards compatibility for you right there.
Oh, and the other thing that they did as well is the PC checker tool is back if you're a Windows Insider, and it tells you now why your machine fails rather than just saying it's failed, which is handy.
Does it? So can you kind of hear the CEO of Dell laughing in the background somewhere?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so it's not been released yet. You have to be a Windows Insider, but at least Dell says that you need TPM2 enabled, or your processor doesn't support it, or your RAM's not whatever there. So it's there now. Anyway, you can try it now if you're a Windows Insider.
Or does it say our OEMs need some sweet cash? Allegedly.
And talking about OEM events as well. Finally, on the Windows side of things, we have got a Surface event, haven't we? Is it 22nd September?
We have, yes. And then Apple have now trumped that by doing their event on the 14th.
Yeah. So we're expecting new Surfaces, maybe a Surface with a new form factor, Surface Duo 2, Surface Go 3.
I think definitely Duo 2. If we don't see a Studio, then we know the Studio's dead. I mean, I think we had the Surface Laptop 4 early this year, so probably it must be I guess it'll be a new Surface Pro, and I would hope a Duo 2.
Yeah, and maybe there was some talk about maybe some like a mini Surface Studio type device that's been patents and things flying around, so maybe there's something like that as well.
Possibly, although maybe the monitor, because obviously the highlight on the Surface Studio was always that screen. I mean, I would have happily bought that screen and not had the box, because the Surface Studio screen was magnificent.
Yeah. So maybe we'll see something like. It said, I mentioned that they added some extra processors to the list for some i7 ones, particularly the Surface Studio one was one of those.
What that?
Yeah, I love that one. So well, we can talk about that probably as a bit closer to time. But yeah, I'm looking forward to see what gets announced there. I'm also thinking that they'll announce Android 11 for the Surface Duo as well, the original Surface Duo to get Android 11. I think that's what Duo 2 will ship with, so I think they'll include that as well. They might not do, but I think that's likely.
Yes.
We'll see some new Surface devices.
I mean, they did commit to hardware to software updates, so yes, I'm sure that'll be there. But I think the Duo one always felt like it was kind of it is a first gen device, and Microsoft tend to improve things for second gen. So hopefully the Duo 2 will deal with the shortcomings of the Duo 1, and then we'll see if they do a Duo 3, which is the and it'd be interesting to see what they do
release dates of any new hardware with all these chip shortages. I don't know if this is directly effective, but I was going to pre-order. Well, in fact, I did pre-order a Samsung Galaxy Watch to replace my original one. But then they just cancelled the order and said, well, they didn't cancel the order, just said, we don't know when it'll be, it's out of stock, even though it was a pre-order. We don't know when it's coming back in stock. Thanks. So I just cancelled it and thought, well, I'll live with the old one for now. I'll save my money. I don't really care.
I mean, in many ways, I think that's what's going to be the most interesting thing in the Apple event next week, because it's going to be, are Apple as affected as everyone else by the same shop, by the same thing, because they are making more of their own chips now, but they traditionally have always said, here's the device, it'll be in shops next week. Can they do that this time? A bit too seriously, I think.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that a bit nearer the time. We've only got a few minutes left, so I want to give Garry a bit of chance just to let us know how you got on at Fully Charged Live.
Fully Charged Live outside, it was an extremely good event. They yet again created the biggest EV traffic jam in the world. Getting in on the first day was a little bit challenging. To be fair to the organisers, they sorted that out and ready for the next day. I think it took me an hour and 15 minutes to get my one and a bit miles to the venue on the first day, and 5 minutes on the second day, so they definitely sorted that out. But it was, and
did it flatten everybody's battery while doing that?
Well, not really. We're all fine. The overriding impression I had, though, was when you got to the car park was the silence. Okay, there were a few ICE cars there because there was a few people who were EV curious going to it, which was good to see. But the majority of cars there were EVs, and it was really quiet. But yeah, a great event. I can't say the actual event was quiet because there was a real hubbub there. It was outside, it had a real festival feel to it. It's almost like going to a pop festival or a rock festival. It was just that sort of vibe to it. And I got some fantastic interviews, one of which we'll play in a little while. Adrian Keane from Instavolt. But yeah, really good stuff. Some very interesting talks. Talked with a guy who was a very early adopter of EV vans. He's been running a van around the Lake District for many years. One of these really low capacity old Nissans. You'd think it would be impossible in the Lake District, especially when they didn't have all the chargers back then, but he's managed to do deliveries all around the lakes very easily in his thing. So he talks about that a little bit in one of the interviews. Some of the usual suspects we've got on some really interesting interviews with lots of people from the industry. So that will be coming up over the next few weeks. I've just got to edit them. I've got so much material. I had to actually cut back some of the interviews because I could have got loads and loads, but I wouldn't have actually seen any of the show. And the show was really good. There was lots of stuff on display. Virtually every manufacturer was there. We've seen a couple of big names, but virtually every EV was out there. Some new ones being launched. There was the first sight of the Nissan Ariya, which is an interesting vehicle. Their first EV with CCS charging rather than shadow mode, which I think is going to move the goalpost towards CCS in this country. The first sight of a Tesla Model Y in the country, which wasn't actually supposed to be there, but someone driven it over from Europe especially to bring it to the show, which is another interesting vehicle. And then there was things like the Ioniq 5 and the have you seen the Ioniq 5? It reminds me so much of something out of the 80s. It's 8-bit. It really is. It's even got 8-bit lights.
No, I haven't seen
it. Just Google it and have a look at the lighting cluster. It's so 8-bit. It really is. It's not even 16-bit. It's definitely 8-bit. It's definitely got a design. I quite like it. Other people in my family don't like it at all. But that's built on this EGMP platform I've mentioned before, which is really innovative with the different charging structure. And there was also the key EV6, which is also built on that. Again, very interesting cars, but lots to see, lots to do. I've got some videos coming out on my channel, but also loads of interviews coming out on here, and some really interesting stuff. So listen out for it.
Actually, so I've got is this the one you're talking about? Let's share my screen. Yeah, I think I've seen a few of these. I've seen a couple of these on the road. Are they on the road now in the UK?
They are, yeah. They all hit the market a few weeks. Well, actually, most of them came into the country just before the show. So there were loads of people turning up in their new Ioniq 5s to the event. But yeah, the back.
I think I've seen a couple of this with this grille.
Yeah, it's really interesting sort of light structure, and the backlights are even more 8-bit looking. It's very 1980s. That does remind me of the original high-end pony in a lot of ways of design, but that's actually what it was inspired by, so not surprising.
Well, the pony
today, yeah.
You know, the guy that designed the Hyundai pony they poached from Austin Morris, and he designed the Morris Marina.
Yes, he did. Yeah.
Which was a fabulous car. I won't have anybody say anything against it either. Morris Marina Coupe 1.6, fantastic car.
It was a terrible car.
No, you can't say that. My Morris Marina was brilliant. My dad refused to get in it, and my mum would only get in it if it had wellies. She had a wellies on because it leaked. But a brilliant car when you first passed your test.
But this is a great car. It really is. I mean, I'm not joking when I say certain people don't actually like it in my family, so I'll never get one. But I think it's a really clever car, and it's got a lot going for it, and the actual technology in it is just amazing. So you've got things. I mean, the EV6 has got this as well. Like you turn the indicators on, and it's got cameras embedded in the light in the rear view, so it actually gives you the blind spot in the dashboard, so you can actually see your blind spot as you pull out, as well as use the physical mirrors, which I think is better than just having cameras. But anyway, wow. lots to see there, and lots of interesting stuff, and I'll talk more about that over the coming weeks. But it was very interesting, and some of the interviews were really interesting. So some of the changes coming along, particularly in the charging market, which I think is going to make so much difference to people's lives actually using EVs. I think it's going to make it so much easier for us all to be out and about. So yeah, and one of those interviews today.
And that's what needs to make it easier, so people like me and Richard can upgrade without any charging anxiety.
Well, you haven't got charging. I mean, that EV6 does, or that Ioniq does 300 miles on one charge. I mean, you can get anywhere in the country on 300 miles.
Yeah,
even up to you.
Yeah. yeah, that's it. Yeah, I mean, and it's just a matter of time, and then getting that over the next few years, it's just. Once the prices start to equate and everything else, and people understand the models. Yeah,
I think that's I mean, and there's been a few things this week about really cheap EVs starting to come to the market, some Chinese ones, sort of sub 20,000, which is cheap for a car these days, because as we all know, prices are rocketing at the moment on all cars, including second-hand ones. Taking second-hand EVs, if you bought an EV last year, you probably can sell it for more than you actually paid for it, which is amazing for cars.
Right. Yeah.
So yeah, that's the way we are.
Yeah, excellent. Well, we'll try and get those interviews out starting this week. Which I know you've got all that content, so we'll make sure we do that. So, Garry, where can we find you then, and your EV channel, amongst other things?
Well, you can find the EV channels that I post over on YouTube, though that name may change over time. You can also find me on Fascinating Tech, which I have got a release out, and I'm also about to spin off Fascinating EV as well, having talked to a few people at this event. So we're going to do some charger reviews, which I think is not actual car reviews, but all the infrastructure around EVs. So that should be coming up soon.
Fantastic.
And follow me on Twitter, Garry WN. Yeah.
And and Richard, where can we follow you and your Lego tweets? I think mainly mainly Lego.
I'm afraid yes, mainly Lego, a lot of Lego. Yes, Richard_Speed on Twitter.
And my son Jack, even though he's 19, has just bought loads of Lego. He's bought what was it? He just bought the Mandalorian ship in Lego. He just bought loads of Lego, and I had to put a shelf up for him at the weekend to put his new Lego on. He's like 19, sat on the floor building Lego.
You see, the correct Lego is a Space Shuttle Discovery model. That is the correct Lego.
Yeah, that's impressive piece of Lego.
It was
loads of scale extras fully charged. Talk about.
Oh, imagine, yeah, that's an EV, yeah.
Original EVs.
Okay, so we'll be back same time, same place next week. We will have a friend of the show is working on a massive a project around the history of Zune, and amongst other things. So we're going to be talking Zune in a few weeks' time as well. That's going to be great to look back at that. Still got my things over there somewhere. We'll be back same time, same place next week. You can email me, ian@thedislifestyle.com. I'm IS Dixon on Twitter. So we'll see you next week.
Cheerio.
So welcome, Adrian. So pleased to have you on the show. So you're from Instavolt. and Instavolt are probably our listeners and watchers' favourite charging network, from what we've seen on our stats. And I know you've been asked this 100 times, but why do you think that is? Why do you think people are so satisfied with Instavolt?
Yeah, it's a question I do get asked a lot. And the question is, what's the silver bullet? What do you do differently to make your network so reliable? And I think we do the basics really well. So we maintain them all ourselves. We don't have a service level agreement with a third party. All of the engineers on the Instavolt team, they work for us. If we need to divert them to a problem site, we can do that. We've got really good relationships with our supply chain as well, from the hardware manufacturers to the software providers as well. We just focus on the basics because that's what we'd expect as drivers, and we're trying to uncomplicate the whole experience, and that was one of the reasons we were the first to introduce contactless payment as well, because it shouldn't be any more complicated than that.
And very true, very, very true. I mean, I remember turning up to one of your first tritium. How do you pronounce that?
Tritium.
Tritium charges many years ago, and thinking this is so much easier than everybody else is doing at the time, and you've kept that going as well. I heard you actually get some new charges.
Well, yes. So we are fundamentally a product agnostic network. Yeah. We are operating very much in the rapid public space, but as to what technology we deploy, it's always going to be what we think is the best at any point in time. So you've mentioned we have 50 kilowatt tritium units on the network. We've got charge port units that are capable of 50 to 125 kilowatts. We've started deploying BYD units that are 120 kilowatts. You'll see Alpatronic 150 kilowatt units on the network this year, and 160 kilowatt units are in development as well. And we're always looking for the best solution for the site and the use case. And
of course maintain that reliability. And as you said, you maintain them yourselves, and I've met some of your maintenance people who are the loveliest people out, I have to say.
They are the face of the network, and they are all lovely, and they will all engage and happily explain how things work.
I've never known such a friendly group of people getting on. I mean, I met one of your guys, I think it was in Necton services when they were first going live, and it was chucking it down a rain, and he was out there, but he was still happy to converse and chat, and it was really, really nice people. But that's, as you say, it's the face of the network, and they do give that incredibly good presentation and also helpfulness as well. I mean, I know when I turned up at Necton, they hadn't actually gone live, and he was explaining when they were going to go live, and also pointing out one of your competition's charges down the road, because that was actually available, and I could use that if I needed it. Right. Which obviously is not. I mean, eventually you wouldn't want that, but that was a very useful thing at that time. Yes. And I think that does. It just. I mean, compared to some other people I've met from other networks, that is obviously coming from somewhere. But I guess it comes to leadership from the top that is filtered down.
Yeah, well, we're a small team. Lots of us have worked together. Instavolt was incorporated in 2016, but lots of us worked together at our previous venture. We've all come from the renewable space. So we worked together, we're friends and we're colleagues. And there was no legacy system. We started from scratch, clean sheet of paper. And I think that makes it an awful lot easier, because you could just start by speccing out what you want and not having to try and shoehorn an existing product into your new lineup. But yes, we've always sort of said, keep it simple. Have fun working together, give the customers exactly what they want, and as long as we don't deviate away from that, I think we're in a really good place. And we've had some fantastic feedback from the public today. Yeah. It's great to hear.
That's really good. Now, obviously, there's challenges out there. I mean, the government hasn't been helpful to you this year, I think. I mean, the whole VAT thing has been a...
Yes, yeah. It's an interesting one, isn't it? Because if you have the luxury of off-road parking, you can benefit from 5% on your home VAT bill, but that's not the case in public.
Yeah.
And I feel quite strongly that creates a barrier between the haves and the have-nots. So I think the government needs to have a good look at that. We're happy to engage with them on it as well.
Yeah.
I know we're not the only network who found ourselves in that position. Yeah. And the only loser in that scenario was the consumer.
And I know, I mean, I've spoken to other networks as well, and I know some of them had secretly sort of got reassurance from the customers and exercise beforehand that they were charging at the right rate, and then suddenly it's dropped on you that it's changed. So it's not helpful.
Yes, it's not, but. I mean, it's a nascent industry, isn't it? We're going through. There'll be change. There'll be bumps in the road. I think the really important thing is that government engages with the private CPOs. It's a two-way engagement. You know, government are open to discussion. That will continue to evolve. I don't think that story's over yet.
So when I've talked to some of the other charging networks in the past, one of the things that comes across is some of the challenges you face with planning permission and particularly parking space size, which I think is a challenge. Yes. I think for everybody. I mean, I've noticed that you do as well as you can to get space, but some of them are still quite tight in terms of charging. Is that a council thing? Is that a government?
It's quite a hot topic at the moment, because it's also linked quite closely to accessibility. And one of the challenges CPOs will face is we are often operating on third-party land. So we've got national partnerships with McDonald's and Costa Coffee and KFC. And the tricky thing is if you're taking, not just converting a space to an EV space, but actually if you have to take spaces away as part of that, sometimes that can be difficult from a planning point of view. If it's a busy car park, that can make it difficult as well. Where we are now able to build spaces from scratch, some of your listeners will be familiar with our hub at Banbury on the M40. That was essentially a start from scratch build. That's 8 chargers. We're expanding that to 16. And the 8 chargers on the other side of the road, i.e. the new 8, will build with bigger spaces, more accessibility, with that in mind, because we've had that feedback. Where we're retrofitting an existing site, sometimes we're constrained a little bit within what we can do. But a number of drivers have written to me expressing their concerns. I've had a chat with all of them actually, and we're trying to incorporate that into our new designs as best we can.
I know it's really challenging because some of the planning regulations go back to the 50s, and cars were a lot narrower than.
Yes, of course, and now the world's full of 4x4s with enormous footprints as well.
Well, also, I mean, even smaller cars are going wider because of the need for safety protection. Once you put side curtains in, you add a couple of inches either side of the car without even tilting. So even the cars which would have fitted back in that day, if they were being produced now, the safety regulations would push them wider anyway.
So I think that will again, that's another area where we haven't quite seen the end of the story yet, and there's more we can do to work with drivers to facilitate that.
That's good. I'm really pleased to hear that. I mean, accessibility is something I particularly have been in my bonnet about. I think I've seen a lot of people really challenged to use public charging, and there are challenges which are very difficult to get around. I mean, for example, cable weight. I mean, you've done some quite clever stuff with swing out cable supports and things, which I think is really good. But I've certainly seen people challenged to actually hold and lift cables.
And as you move to faster rates of charging, of course, you have more challenges with cables. Yes, I'm not so sure there's a quick and easy answer to cable weight, but as you go up the power range, undoubtedly they become a little bit heavier, and I think you end up on a sweet spot of charging at about 150 when you take all of those different factors into account.
It's I mean, as long as you can charge at 150 consistently, it's a fast enough rate. I think I'd agree. I'd agree. And you've got these chargers in banks as well, where you can share charge across a couple of chargers. Is that still the case? Yes.
So some of our cars, it's perhaps an easy way of explaining it to some of your colleagues. It's a bit like the Tesla stalls, the A and B stalls, power share, and that's the same with some of our charge point units. And it will tell you on the screen if it's capable of that, and that just provides a little bit more flexibility. It's also quite useful in grid constrained scenarios to be able to share dynamically rather than give it maximum power to every single stall. We're seeing a lot of developments now in power management and making the most of constrained grids. And some of that comes from within the charger itself, some from within the software, control in the back office. We've got some pretty cool things that we're working up and starting to deploy as well. And being smart with constrained grids, I think, is key to opening up an awful lot more sites.
Because that's one thing you do hear a lot from people, and not so much on your network, but where they turned up and the car's supposedly capable of 150 kilowatt charging, and they get 30, and they wonder why that's happening. And I know sometimes that is actually constrained grid, but it's not always obvious that that's the case to the end user, I guess. And
it's a common one. It's a common one where a car is advertised at X and the charger is advertised at Y, but they only receive a lower number. It can be a number of factors. Of course, the battery management system influences a lot of the charging behaviour. It can be constrained grid, the hardware itself. We're sympathetic when drivers will inform us that they don't necessarily get the charging speed that they expect. But again, I think some of that's going to be solved by education in the market as well.
And that's the challenge, isn't it? I think, particularly some of the things I've seen, some of the salesmen at certain garages say to people on charging, it's made it even more of a challenge.
At the point of sale.
At the point of sale,
I think there's some failings there that could be addressed as well.
I mean, I certainly had someone say, who's a member of our iPace group, say that we were told by the dealer we could charge 100 kilowatts all the time. We're only getting 30 kilowatts. But you're at 80% charge, you're not going to get that.
We've had a couple of experiences where drivers will. Obviously, we're a rapid DC network, so not accessible to most hybrids. We've had hybrid drivers call us up, and they're really upset because the person who sold them the car has said, absolutely, you can use this on Instavolt. and of course that's not the case.
Yeah.
And it's heartbreaking because we can't offer any help at that point. So yeah, a lot of education starts, I think, in at the dealer level, at the point of sale. I think there's a lot of misinformation online. I think too many journalistic pieces do end with charging infrastructure is not fit for purpose. They look backwards too much. Troubles we've had, and it'd be great. It would just be fantastic to see a piece that concludes and look at the rate of progress, look at the journey we're on, look at the CPOs who are doing incredible things to actually give drivers exactly the experience they want. So I think let's change the rhetoric, let's get the education out there and break down some of those barriers and give drivers a bit more confidence that it's not scary.
I mean, your expansion is amazing. I mean, I've seen Instavolts popping up everywhere.
We work hard. There's loads more to do though.
Yeah.
So we've got 600, we've broke through 600 active rapid chargers in the ground. We've got 100 in construction, so that takes us through 700. We've got quite literally thousands in the pipeline through our relationships with the likes of McDonald's and Costa and KFC. So we're focused very much on building, never taking our eye off that reliability, ease of use point, because I think that's fundamental to our offer. But I mean, for us, the start of the journey, we've been doing this for 4 years, but we still feel like there's so much more to do. And there's a team out there meeting and greeting members of the public who are absolutely passionate about building their network.
Now, one thing I just wanted to mention before we wrap up, you've added an app in since the last time I spoke to you.
Sorry,
an app.
An app, yes.
So you seen much take up on that? Because I think always one of the things about your sites has been the convenience of obviously turning up in contactless payment has been things. So what do you see the app adding to that for people?
So the app is entirely optional. So it launched into the App Store formally a couple of months back. It's entirely optional. We'll never move away from contactless. Drivers love it. It's so convenient, and most people have an Android app or a debit or credit card. But recognising some business users like having an app because they can track their history, they can have VAT receipts on demand. The app can be used simply as a map, just to find your latest Interlock charges. But there are little added bits and pieces within the app to hopefully entice drivers and make the user experience a bit more fun. So you can accrue points that you can turn into credit. We can save promotions and do offers at participating sites as well. So it's entirely optional. As to your question of uptake, it's actually exceeded all of our expectations with active accounts as well. So drivers who are actually using it to charge. We're through 35,000 active users at the moment, which if you think is a percentage of the BEV population is fantastic. So there's clearly a role in an opportunity for an app, but there's no denying contactless was, for us, game-changing, and it's still the preferred method of access.
That's really good. So you've mentioned you've got the partnerships coming up now, so is that a very active expansion you're doing with those providers of
yes.
food and drink?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there was different brands and landowners and site operators are coming to the market at different speeds, and the likes of McDonald's and Costa and KFC, they realise they've got a portfolio, they've got an estate with a 30-minute dwell time, generally with really good access on the A roads, close to junctions, and they're a perfect location for rapid charging. And I applaud them for forward thinking and engaging with the market. Thrilled to bits they chose to partner with Instavolt. So I think that's going to be a big part of the rapid charging puzzle. We've got more partnerships. I can't tell you about them yet. We've got a couple more really exciting ones to announce as well. Just going through all the fun paperwork, and that will just gives us more geographical spread, more location types, more places for drivers to stop.
Brilliant. Well, I think that's a great expansion. The one question I keep getting asked is why can't I do click and collect at McDonald's when I'm on the Instagram?
I saw this online. I saw this on Twitter.
Yeah. I think I may have tweeted it because I've been asked it so many times.
Okay. So I saw it and I thought that's a good idea. Yeah. So next time we catch up with them, we're going to see what the answer to the possible is. On our new generation of chargers, we've got an entirely separate second screen that we can use for bespoke content, be it advertising, and it's programmable. So maybe it's certainly not a promise, but it's the spark of thoughts there, and we're thinking that would be pretty cool, wouldn't it? So,
good idea.
See if anything happens there.
Brilliant. Thanks so much for your time.
Thank you very much for having me. Enjoy the rest of the show.
Thank you.